To start, I guess I'd like to, you know, the governor says we can't afford redevelopment agencies right now. And I'm just curious, what do you guys say to that? When he says we can't afford them, we got to get rid of them, we're going to save $1.7 billion, it's going to go right into the bank. What do you all say, Delilah?
Thank you, David. I mean, part of what we're looking at the redevelopment agency in Los Angeles is that we are really an economic driver for a lot of the communities. We have 31 project areas that consist of about 7 to 8% of the total land mass in the city of Los Angeles. So we are in the poorest of the poorest neighborhoods. We're in communities that have suffered from disinvestment for decades. And through the use of our redevelopment dollars, we're really able to invest into both the economic development and the housing development within those communities and in those neighborhoods. For the city of Los Angeles, the fact that in this last year alone, we helped to create 33,000 jobs, both construction and permanent jobs, is a significant number for us. Our investment is directly correlated to the amount of jobs that we create in these neighborhoods. And because of our policies, which I can talk about later, we ensure that those jobs are high-paying, living wage jobs. So this proposal is deficit.
I don't want to lose it. So one of the things you're saying is the CRA only exists if it's successful. It only generates the money to generate more stuff if it does a good job in the first place.
Correct. We are based on the fact that we get tax increments. So the more successful that we are, the better we're able to reinvest into these neighborhoods. Of the 31 neighborhoods that we have, the 31 communities that we have, we keep the dollars in those project areas. So the taxes are being generated from those project areas, stay in those project areas, and really help to create more investment opportunities. Oftentimes, the redevelopment agencies are the first ones that put the most risky money into a transaction. We're there at the beginning when other private investment is definitely more reticent to go in. With our investment and with our commitment to a neighborhood, we're able to stabilize it, we're able to create opportunities to bring in private dollars.
Bill, would you follow up on this, Bill? Because one of the things she touches on is it's difficult a lot of times, particularly in this kind of market, for the private sector to stick its neck out too far at the very start. What would the loss of a CRA kind of mechanisms that it makes available mean to you as a developer and being able to create new housing, new opportunities?
Well, first let me say, so as not to appear completely tone deaf politically, your previous speaker on the budget I thought was very accurate and on point. I mean, there's no magic bullets here and everybody's getting hit. So I would make two general comments to your question. One is that over the past 20 years or so, I don't know when it was first instituted, but redevelopment has become essentially virtually the only significant source of affordable housing money in the state. And that's simply because it's required by state law that 20% of all tax revenues or tax increments generated in redevelopment areas must go to affordable housing. If there wasn't that requirement, not so much in LA, but in other cities, you wouldn't get anything. But that's a huge issue now, because if redevelopment were abolished, there is no mechanism to replace that. You can't even say, well, we're sympathetic to that, but not to the rest of redevelopment. If there's no tax increment, there's no way to get those funds. This is happening at the same time that the feds, we know, and you heard earlier, are going to cut everything. And this is the Obama budget. We haven't seen the final budget. So what's the limited amount of housing money from HUD, and there isn't much, is also going to get cut. That would leave I would say, certainly in our projects, it's probably upwards of 90%, and we're active in 20 cities in California, including LA. In the state, I would say redevelopment, so-called set-aside funds, that 20% money, accounts for upwards of 70% of all the affordable housing subsidy that goes into these affordable housing renovation and new construction projects, whether it be for homeless or low and moderate income tenants. I don't know what happens if that goes away overnight.
Are those projects possible?
No. Now, let me talk about broadly. I'll give you some examples. We are under construction now in East Hollywood with the nonprofit PATH organization on I think it's 48 units, I don't even remember, a project, permanent supportive housing for the homeless. That had, CRA money was used to acquire the land and further subsidize the project. There is simply no way to replace that kind of thing. And again, I'm acknowledging that all the other social programs are being cut. Fortunately, it's not my responsibility to balance the budget. All of those affordable housing projects, and I'm speaking of those that are typically 100% affordable, none of them will happen, not one. There simply will be no more money, and there's no mechanism to replace that. So even legislators who are sympathetic to merely the affordable housing component of redevelopment don't have an answer to that question. So that's one whole area. The other comment I would make is not projects that are, say, mixed income. We do a lot of mixed income housing, or projects that are more economically development oriented. The state finance department argues that redevelopment is just moving the chairs around. In other words, it may generate a project here, but it would have happened over there. There's no net benefit to the state. At some level, there's some truth to that, but here's what will happen. If there were no redevelopment-like mechanism, you will simply see more sprawl. The infill projects, which tend to be more expensive, they have more greater infrastructure needs, brownfield sites, things that the market, to your question, generally won't pay for, those won't happen. Yes, there will be economic activity, I would have to admit, but it's certainly not going to be in the inner city, and it won't likely be to the same degree in infill neighborhoods. Now, that's not to say that redevelopment can't be more targeted than it has been or reformed, but I think those two broad areas, smart growth, infill development, and affordable housing, there's no substitute mechanism.